What if there was one way that you could hack your brain to actually take power away from the OCD and anxious thoughts and feelings without having to do anything with the OCD thoughts and feelings, without needing to face your fears or do exposures or change your beliefs or do any of that? That one way is through using humor. And I know we all love humor, we love to laugh, we love a good time, but you might be thinking, okay, can humor really be that powerful? Like, the OCD is horrible, the anxiety, it takes over my mind, it consumes me. How can humor really do anything against something so horrible? So in this video, I'm going to break down scientifically exactly how humor can give you so much power over the OCD and anxiety. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to give you my 4 favorite ways that you can actually start to apply using humor in your life to conquer the OCD and anxiety. And it's my 4 favorite things that I did personally to help me overcome 14 years of OCD and anxiety. So let's jump right into this. The number one reason why humor can be so helpful during your healing process is because of what Tony Robbins refers to as your emotional state. So I want you to think of a time in your life when you were super excited, right? You were in a super excited emotional state. In that moment, you probably weren't super bothered by a lot of things. Your anxiety, your fears, your worries, they probably weren't there as much because you were just feeling super excited. And when you're feeling excited, you were probably believing exciting things and you were thinking exciting things. Everything in your life seemed so much better because you were in that excited emotional state. And now I want you to think of a time when you've been in a fearful emotional state, and maybe that's most of the time. And when you're in that state, there's a lot of fearful thoughts, there's a lot of worrying, there's a lot of beliefs about your life and about yourself and your future that's scary and that's discouraging and that's awful. And it's because you're in that horrible emotional state. So whatever emotional state you're in is extremely impactful on your thoughts, your beliefs, the way you act, everything else in your life. So you can almost look at it like your emotional state is a tree trunk, and then all of the automatic thoughts that go with it, the beliefs, the ways that you perceive the moment, the ways that you automatically want to act, all of that are the branches. So if I'm in a happy emotional state, if that's my tree trunk, then automatically the thoughts, perceptions, actions, all the things that are going to go with that are going to be happy. They're going to be positive things. They're going to be good things that I want. And at the same time, if I have this negative emotional state, so I have this fearful emotional state or tree trunk, then all of the branches, all of the thoughts, the ways of perceiving life, the beliefs, everything that goes with that is going to be negative. It's going to be fearful. It's going to be discouraging, all these awful things. That's why OCD and anxiety can be so tricky, is because we start to memorize these negative emotions, which make us think the negative, fearful thoughts, which makes us feel more fearful emotions, which makes us think more fearful thoughts. And it's just this vicious cycle. But the more that we can train our brain to actually access positive emotional states like humor, fun, laughter, all of those things that go with the humor, the more that we can automatically train our brain to be able to believe and think differently. So whatever that thing is that you're afraid of, whether it's the social OCD or the relationship OCD, or whether it's contamination or religious or whatever it is, if you're in a playful, fun, humorous emotional state, then your beliefs towards that thing, your thoughts, your actions towards that thing are automatically going to be with that positive emotional tree trunk. It's automatically going to be so much better when you're in that emotional state. That's why humor can be so helpful, because yes, humor alone is not going to provide all the healing that you dream of in your life, right? It's not like if you just go and see your favorite comedian for 10 hours a day, then you're going to just be totally healed for good and never experience OCD again. No, there are deeper concepts, there are deeper strategies, deeper changes that we need to make that I'll teach in other videos on my channel. But the place where humor becomes so powerful is that the more, again, that you can teach yourself to connect with that playful emotional state, connect with the humor, the having fun, the laughing, the more that it can give you power to then better apply the other strategies. So when you learn the other strategies, when you're going into those strategies from a place of humor, a place of laughing and having fun, then you're going to be so much more free, so much more empowered, and automatically be able to think and believe and feel so much differently towards the OCD when you're applying the other strategies. Right? So that for me was my favorite way that I used humor, was just to boost everything else that I was doing. So every other video, all the other strategies and concepts that I teach, you can add humor to it. So you can either add humor before you face your fear, before you try to change your belief or whatever it is. You can add humor, after you did something scary, right? So for me, I had tons of social anxiety, social OCD. So before I would call and ask a girl on a date, I would just sit and just crack jokes to myself. Like, oh, dude, that's crazy when this and this, or oh, that was so funny when this and this, or oh, I just love, like, oh, that'd be crazy if this happened. And I'd just be cracking these like dumb jokes in my head right before I called. And then right after saying the jokes, boom, dial. Because then I'm going into that call in a totally new emotional state, which means automatically I'll be feeling way more confident. I'll know what to say. Everything will just be so much better on that phone call that before, if I'd been in that fearful emotional state, I probably would have had all the fearful thoughts and the, oh, they're going to judge me. Oh, what if I say this wrong? All of those different things. But not only can you do humor when the OCD is getting triggered or when you're doing something scary, but really just try to add humor into your life as much as you possibly can, right? For me, as I was going through the healing process, as I went through that maybe 4-week period where I transformed my life, overcame like 95% of the OCD and anxiety, all the time I was finding humor in everything, even in the dumbest, simplest things that most of the time we would never see humor in. I was looking for the humor. I was finding the humor. I was creating humor even when it wasn't there. I remember during this time period, there was this sign on campus at the university that I attended that had a picture of a bike and it had like an X through the bike and it said, during class break. So what the sign meant is during class break, you're not allowed to ride bikes because I guess then it would get too crowded and you could hit someone walking to class, whatever. But because I was always looking for humor all the time, then every single day as I'd pass that sign, in my head, I saw that sign as during class, break your bike, right? Because it has a picture of a bike with a X through it and during class, break. So I just imagine, someone's like riding their bike, trying to get to class, and all of a sudden the bell rings, class starts, and they're just like, oh, shoot. And they just grab their bike and just start like, boom, 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 just like destroying their bike, right? Or I'd imagine that, they're pedaling to get to class and, the bell rings and class starts, and all of a sudden some security officer comes and's like, get off your bike, and they just take the bike and start like destroying it. Something like totally absurd or dumb or silly, but in my mind, that got me into that humorous emotional state. I was finding the humor. I was finding what was funny, even when most people would be like, no, there is no humor there. Even if you're like, that's not funny at all. Like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Great. That's fine. Because to me, I found that funny. So for you, whatever it is that you find funny, just practice finding humor in things. Even as I was walking around and I'd see people's facial expressions, I just like noticed the fun, the humor in it. Like, oh, they must be really worried about their test. Like, oh boy, their face, like, dang, they had a rough test just barely. Or like, oh, that person's thinking about someone that they like. Cause like, oh, that look on their face, like, I see what's happening here. Or just whatever, just finding the humor. Or literally anything. Like if I trip, I'm gonna laugh at myself, be like, that's hilarious. Like, oh, that's so funny. They probably saw me. Just find the humor in your day-to-day life, in the moments. Because what this does is it trains your brain to practice being in that funny emotional state, which is then gonna automatically change your thinking, your feeling, your beliefs, everything in life to start to go along with that emotional state. And this introduces the second point of how humor can be so powerful, is what I call subconscious indication. If we want to change our beliefs, if we want to change our thinking, a lot of times we can do that without even directly trying to tell our brain to think or believe something different. Right? So what subconscious indication is, and I have a full video that I'll link below in this video that will go way more in depth on how to do this. But with subconscious indication, it's that a lot of times if I sit and tell my brain, oh, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, that's not actually indicating to my subconscious mind that I'm happy. Instead, even though I'm saying I'm happy, what that's actually indicating to my subconscious is that
I'm not happy, and that's why I'm trying to prove to myself I'm happy.
I'm not actually happy, and that's why I'm trying to sit here and tell myself I'm happy to try to somehow gain happiness, because obviously
I'm not.
If I can take, even when the fearful thought gets triggered, if I can then use humor, make that thing funny, or just in general in life, when I'm living life and I'm just practicing finding the humor, then that automatically indicates to my brain, I must be safe. Life must be good. Life must be filled with blessings. My needs must be met. I must be free and happy because I'm finding the humor, right? So rather than trying to convince yourself to believe something new, I have to convince myself to believe that I'm safe, or I have to convince myself to believe that I'm actually loved, or that I'm actually can be confident, or that I'm actually happy. Instead, the more that I practice using humor, the more that automatically indicates to my subconscious,
I must be happy.
because I'm finding humor all the time. Or, I must be confident because I'm finding humor all the time. And I only find humor when I'm feeling confident. Because if I'm super afraid of something, then I'm not going to be finding the humor, because instead I'm going to be focusing on that fear. So the more that you teach yourself to find the humor, the more that automatically indicates to your brain, life is good. It's going to automatically indicate to your brain, wow, we must be believing something good. We must be feeling something good, all those things. And it's teaching your brain how to access that positive, fun, emotional state, which will automatically change the thoughts, the beliefs, the ways you perceive life to go with that. So my 4 favorite ways to add humor into my life, and my 4 favorite ways to actually apply humor specifically towards anxious and fearful and OCD thoughts and feelings. The first one is just making things funny, changing the meanings of things to be like, wow, that's really funny, right? If I'm about to give a public speech and I'm terrified for it, then I could be like, dang, like just think in 5 years when I'm looking back, if I freeze or I don't know what to say, like that's gonna be hilarious. I'll be talking to my friends and I'll be like, guys, you remember that time? Like that was crazy. Oh, that was so embarrassing. Like, oh, that's super funny, right? A quote that I heard one time, and I don't even remember where, but I loved it, is it's like, things are only bad until you find the humor in them. And obviously, depending on what your theme of OCD is specifically, you're gonna need to use humor in different ways. If your theme is about harming a loved one, you're probably not gonna be like, wow, that'd be really funny. Like, no, right? But you can still find ways to use humor. You could be like, really, brain? Like, really? You think that just because you put some pixels, this image in my mind of these pixels, like, really, you think that that can get me? You think that that can make me afraid that I'm gonna take the action? Like, I'm like, what? Like, of course that's just absurd. Of course that just thinking an image isn't gonna make me do something. Like, that's ridiculous. Or if it's something that you're like, I just can't add humor to my specific theme, then like I said, just find humor in general about life. If you're afraid of some horrible thing or some horrible image in your mind, then just start laughing about something else. Remember a different joke that has nothing to do with that, or just find humor about something else that's totally not related. The second way to add humor that is very, very simple is whatever that OCD thought is, whatever your brain's telling you, just think that exact same thought, but give it a funny voice, give it a goofy voice. Right? So if my OCD is telling me, oh, what if these people are judging me, and oh, they hate you, and oh, you're the worst, and oh, you're disgusting, then I'd be like, oh, man, you're the worst. Oh, I'm disgusting. Oh, or just like some like, oh yeah, oh, I'm disgusting. Like some voice to just show my mind, again, the subconscious indication. It's like the fact that I'm giving that voice to it, I could be thinking a terrifying thought. And the fact that I'm giving the voice like, oh no, that would be so bad, automatically tells my brain, oh yeah, that's something dumb. That's something silly, or that's something that's just absurd. That, of course, that's not going to happen. Of course, we don't need to be afraid of that, because like that's the dumbest thing ever. That brings me into the third way. The third way that you can add humor is to make the thought something that is overboard absurd, right? So for me, one of my themes of OCD was obsessing over not having sweat marks. I know that's a very rare theme, but I had the fear of, if I have sweat marks on my clothes, then everyone's going to judge me. They're going to hate me. It's going to be horrible. So I would obsess over not sweating, not letting anyone see my sweat marks. It was awful for me, right? And so when I'd have that fearful thought of, oh no, what if I have sweat marks? Oh, what if I start sweating? Then I'd be like, yeah. And I'm going to start sweating so much that I'm just going to be drenched in sweat. And all of a sudden I'm going to become Aquaman. And there's just going to be like a waterfall flowing behind me. And it's going to be crazy. And everyone's going to be like running and screaming. And I'm going to start like swimming through the hallways. And it's just going to be like chaos. Right? When you tell that to your brain, when every time your brain triggers that terrifying thought of, oh, what if I have sweat marks? I then automatically go to that absurd, crazy thing. Then that automatically indicates to my brain, wow, this thing is absurd. This thing would never happen, which means the fearful thought is also something that's probably absurd and would never happen. It's also probably absurd that I'm even caring about sweat marks at all. And it adds the humor. You're going to feel goofy. You're going to feel silly while you do it, which gives you so much power. And then the fourth way, and possibly my favorite way to use humor, is literally just to laugh out loud. Or if you're in a place where you can't laugh out loud, right? You're in a business meeting or whatever, then in your mind, imagine that you are laughing out loud. Right? So either it's laughing out loud, like, or it's in your mind, like, whatever it is, but just laughing out loud, right? The thought would get triggered, the terrifying thought, oh, what if this horrible thing's happening? I'd be like, just laugh at it. And even like slap my knee, or even overboard, like over the top laugh at it in like a super ridiculous way. It's like, like, Again, just to tell my brain, that's absurd. Like, I'm treating it like it's absurd because it is, which automatically indicates to my brain, it's absurd, it's funny, and it's gonna make you feel silly. Like, what? I'm actually laughing out loud right now? Like, oh, this is, right? It's gonna shock you out of that old thought pattern and help you actually have more freedom. So I would actually play it out like, my little brother, he likes to talk trash on me all the time. Like, oh, I'm gonna dunk on you. Oh, I'm gonna destroy you in one-on-one. And when he says those things to me, I'm always like, like, oh, this guy, he's hilarious. Like, oh, mom, did you hear that? Like, he's so funny. He thinks he could dunk on me. I treat it the same way with the OCD thoughts, right? The thought comes in of, oh no, what if I'm a horrible person? I'm just like, did you hear that? Did you hear that thought? Like, oh, that's ridiculous. Like, oh, my brain really thinks it can make me afraid of that. Like, oh, that's crazy. And just laugh out loud. Those are the 4 ways, my 4 favorite methods I use to add humor into my life, whether it's specifically in response to the OCD getting triggered or whether it's just in general, just adding as much humor to my life as I possibly can so that I, again, can use subconscious indication and so I can train my brain to access a fun emotional state so that the thoughts and beliefs and perceptions will automatically go with that. And the more that you do this, again, this isn't enough to fully heal and conquer all the OCD by itself, but it can be an incredibly powerful way to boost, to help, to assist all of the other strategies that you can use to overcome the OCD for good. If you want to learn those other strategies, if you want to learn how you can go more in depth and learn the deeper, more lasting ways that you can heal and overcome the OCD, then make sure you subscribe to this channel and comment below which of the 4 strategies sounds the most exciting, sounds like it's going to be the most effective for you, and tell me how you're going to use that strategy to kick your OCD's butt and take your healing to the next level. So I hope you liked the video, and I will see you in the next one.